Have you ever thought about what would happen if you ran from something you were called to do? This next story is about someone who did just that, and the extraordinary journey he went on as a result. This is the story of Jonah, a tale of running, reflection, and redemption. Our story begins in ancient Israel, in a bustling, sun-drenched city filled with cobbled streets and the lively hum of traders exchanging goods. Jonah, a prophet of the Lord, lived among the people. Jonah was a man deeply devoted to God, but also flawed, like all of us. And it would be his human flaws that would soon set his story in motion. One day, while Jonah was in deep prayer, God spoke to him in a clear and commanding voice. "Arise, Jonah, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me." Nineveh was a place known for its cruelty and sin, a vast city in Assyria notorious for its practices that dishonored both God and humanity. Now, here's where Jonah's human side showed. Instead of answering God's call with obedience and courage, Jonah chose rebellion. He was afraid, terrified even. How could one man possibly confront the sins of an entire city? And so, Jonah did what many of us might be tempted to do. He ran. He packed up his belongings and fled. But here's the catch. Jonah didn't just run. He set sail in the opposite direction, boarding a ship headed to Tarshish, as far away from Nineveh as he could imagine. As the ship sailed across the vast waters, Jonah likely thought he was in the clear, that he could outrun the God who had called him. But God, being ever-present and all-seeing, sent a mighty storm to meet Jonah on the open seas. The skies grew dark, the waters roared, and the ship threatened to break apart. The men aboard the ship panicked, each calling out to their gods, but the storm only worsened. Jonah, meanwhile, had descended to the lowest level of the ship, where he had fallen into a deep sleep. The captain found him and shouted, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us, so that we will not perish." The sailors, realizing that this storm was no ordinary one, cast lots to determine who was responsible for their predicament. The lot fell on Jonah, and he confessed. "I am a Hebrew," he said, "and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." Jonah told the crew that the storm had come upon them because he was fleeing from the Lord's command. Terrified, the sailors asked him, "What should we do to make the sea calm down for us?" Jonah, realizing the gravity of his disobedience, replied, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea, and it will become calm. I know that this is my fault." Reluctantly, the sailors did as Jonah said. They prayed for forgiveness, then lifted him and tossed him overboard. Immediately, the raging sea grew calm. The sailors were awestruck and offered sacrifices to the Lord, vowing to serve him. As for Jonah, he plunged deep into the dark, churning waters and began to sink. Was this the end for him? No. God had prepared something extraordinary. A great fish, a massive sea creature, unlike anything Jonah had ever seen, swallowed him whole. Inside the belly of the fish, Jonah spent 3 days and 3 nights. Now, imagine being in Jonah's place. It was dark and damp, with the sound of water and the rhythmic movement of the creature's insides. Jonah had time to think, time to reflect. In that cramped, suffocating space, Jonah prayed. He cried out to the Lord from the depths of despair, acknowledging his wrongdoing and praising God's mercy. "In my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me," Jonah prayed. "From deep in the realm of the dead I called for help, and you listened to my cry. You brought my life up from the pit, O Lord my God." On the 3rd day, God spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah onto dry land. Imagine Jonah, disheveled and smelling of the sea, standing on the shore, finally ready to accept the mission God had given him. Jonah rose and set his sights on Nineveh, the city he had once feared so greatly. When Jonah arrived in Nineveh, he delivered God's message. 40 more days, and Nineveh will be overthrown. His voice rang out through the crowded streets, echoing in the ears of merchants, soldiers, and kings alike. To Jonah's astonishment, the people of Nineveh listened. They believed his words and turned to God in repentance. Even the king of Nineveh himself stood from his throne, removed his royal robes, and covered himself in sackcloth. He issued a decree: let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. And God, in his infinite mercy, did relent. He saw their genuine repentance and spared them from the calamity he had warned about. But Jonah, still human and still flawed, struggled with this outcome. He had done what God asked, yes, but now he was angry. Why? Because God had forgiven the people he had viewed as enemies. Jonah sat outside the city, stewing in his frustration under the shade of a plant that God caused to grow. The next day, God sent a worm to destroy the plant, and Jonah lamented its loss. God then used this moment to teach Jonah a lesson. You are concerned about this plant, the Lord said, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. And should I not have concern for the great city of Nineveh, in which there are more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left? And so Jonah's story ends not definitively, but with an open question. It leaves us reflecting on the boundless mercy of God, not just for Jonah, not just for Nineveh, but for all of his creation. Jonah's story reminds us that running from God leads to storms in our lives, but his mercy can always bring us back on course. So the next time you feel called to something that feels too big, too frightening, or simply inconvenient, remember Jonah. Remember the great fish, the storm, the repentance of an entire city, and most of all, the overwhelming love of a God who is always ready to forgive. What will you do with the call God places on your life? The choice is yours, but the lessons from the story of Jonah are clear. Obedience leads to blessings, and God's mercy never fails.